The surge in preventable crime continues, a surge that is exacting almost as much damage to, well, actually probably more damage in terms of the cost of human life than these natural disasters like Hurricane Helene. Illegal alien with a prior drunk driving conviction, accused of killing a 50-year-old surgeon in Georgia, Dr. Malcolm Goodchild, prominent surgeon, father of three children. Oh, he was killed he's from Georgia, but he was killed in Alabama. The 41-year-old illegal alien had been arrested by the local police department in Alabama and charged with felony reckless murder in connection to Dr. Goodchild's death, head-on collision. Heard a lot about those. We've heard about those in places like Springfield, Ohio, and Charleroi, Pennsylvania as well. People that are unfamiliar with our traffic laws, traffic signals, or worse, are drunk, so on and so forth. Again, does this happen within the American population of American citizens? Of course it does. But how is that a defense for adding to those preventable crimes? Not much of one. In North Dallas, we have this story. We just tell at least just a few of the stories every single day, just to keep it top of mind for people and encourage you to keep it top of mind for your people.
4 men arrested for allegedly beating a woman, tying her up, and robbing her inside her Northwest Dallas home on September 21st are believed to be connected to a Venezuelan gang, according to newly obtained arrest warrants. The robbery was reported by a woman who neighbors say lives alone at a home near the Dallas North Tollway and Lover's Lane. The woman told police she was approached as she got out of her vehicle and forced into her home at gunpoint. She was hit on her head with a gun and tied up. The suspects used Google Translate to communicate. The men threatened to cut off her fingers if she did not cooperate. They stole $75,000 worth of jewelry and more. A fingerprint on a wooden coin box, however, led police to Manuel Hernandez, who coincidentally was booked by Colleyville police just 2 days earlier and released the day before the robbery. The 28-year-old had a defective brake light, no driver's license, no insurance. The vehicle was not registered, and he was allegedly in possession of drug paraphernalia. So Dallas police used that info to locate Hernandez at his apartment in Hearst. During an interview with Dallas police, court documents say Hernandez admitted to being involved in the robbery and gave names of 4 others involved, who he says are part of a criminal street gang known as El Anti-Tren. Of those men, 3 were arrested following a SWAT standoff at an Irving apartment complex Thursday.
El Anti-Tren, I'll have to add that to my list of Venezuelan gangs being represented in American cities. It's wonderful. A related story, Ali Mayorkas has decided against repatriating more than 500,000 workers who were brought into the United States under the humanitarian parole program. Instead of returning to their home countries once their visa expires, 530,000 quote-unquote economic migrants are being encouraged to exploit various loopholes, exemptions, and legal challenges presented in immigration law to prolong their stay and continue working in this country. Sure, again, though, the law is just a workaround for people who want to reside here. I mean, it's really at their discretion. That's how it should be. That seems to be the posture of this administration. For more on this and the national security implications ongoing, pleased to be joined by Stephen Bucci for our weekly conversation. Bucci served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Steve, thanks for joining us, as always. Appreciate it.
It is always good to be on the show. Thank you for having me back.
So, just a stop, look, and listen. I mean, these issues aren't new, but the problem continues to impose terrible costs on American families. And so just to stop, look, and listen, particularly against the backdrop of the war brewing in the Middle East and what that could portend for Iranians' interests in hitting America. It's so easy to get into this country. Other enemies of America, too, sending assets to get into this country illegally and do Americans harm on a more grand scale.
Yeah, look, you know, as you pointed out, all this stuff that the illegal aliens are doing is additive on top of what could happen in America on any given day, because American citizens, natural and naturalized, they do that, right? But why in the world does anybody think it's a good idea to add a couple of million extra people who either have individual problems or are problems because they're like these Venezuelan gang members or the folks living in communities that have no concept of how one lives here in America. So they either just violate the rules or want us to change all of our ways of doing things to accommodate them. And then we pay for the whole thing at a time when we don't have a surplus of taxes. We're in deficit spending all the time. And then the final one, as you bring up, we have adversaries in the world today who are watching this stuff, who watch it not just because they're interested in seeing how dysfunctional we are domestically and how divided we are, but because it's an opportunity to put assets into this country at almost no cost. You don't have to do big fancy, Jason Bourne style infiltrations to get people in here. They just walk over the border, and their home country doesn't even have to fund their infiltration into America. The security will just give them money and give them housing and give them IDs. You don't even have to be a good spy or terrorist to get in here. You just got to know how to
right,
walk.
it's easy. Remember the Turkish guy who walked across the border and he said, complained to the reporter, this was so easy.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, within the numbers that need to be repeated, 625,000 people, 425,000 that have been convicted of a crime, another 200,000 that are facing criminal charges in addition to being here illegally. More than 500,000 people that obviously came here to do harm to Americans or each other or all of the above. And as you say, so if they're sophisticated enough to make their way into this country, then a state sponsor of terror like Iran, the Russians, the Chinese Communist Party, you don't think they're sophisticated enough to do the same for whatever they may intend to inflict on America?
Yeah, and we have no idea who the hundreds of thousands of getaways, to use the term that they use at the border, who those people even are. Those are folks we have no record of. It's frankly just a estimate, which is probably low since it's coming from the government who's trying to justify what they're doing. People who have gone either between the border crossing points, nobody's got a record. Nobody's done even, the vetting of like looking them from head to toe and say, okay, yeah, you look like you're part of the human race, so go on in. We have no idea who those people are. And if you were a high-end bad guy, would you go through the normal border crossing site? Because, there's a possibility somebody might spot you and pull you up on a database. No, you'd go between those sites. So,
well, and now we're seeing it.
Bad guy in those getaways is probably massive.
I mean, just as a case study, again, this last week, the story, it's a couple weeks old, but the story again out of Canada, 20-year-old Pakistani national who was issued a student visa by Trudeau's government and had was there to carry an ISIS-related plot against Jewish residents of New York City. So we had the story last week, the other story about the porous nature of our northern border and the record number of illegal crossings into the northeast part of this country. And this is against the backdrop of an arrest of a Canadian, 20-year-old Canadian on a student visa, Pakistani national, who was essentially an ISIS asset. It's alleged.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me started on the northern border. It's just, people don't understand. The northern border is like 3 times as large as the southern border and way less developed. There's a ton more of it that are just woods. we live in the northern Midwest, me a little further north than you guys, but there's not much up there. In a lot of places you go and the road just stops and somewhere due north Canada starts. There is so much room to move through there, and Canada, like the United States, is very open to immigrants. Once they get here, there's free movement. We don't have people checking papers everywhere, inside the country. So if somebody gets into Canada, it's kind of free reign to get into here. It's not quite, legally free reign like it is going between European Union countries, but it's not much more difficult to move around. That's an enormous vulnerability we have that we hardly ever even bother to talk about.
One thing that bothers me is the ICE data that came out about, the criminals that are here, 15,000 murderers, 13,000 sexual offenders. Did ICE get this information and then they say, okay, well, come on in anyway? I mean, knowing that information, why would they let them in here anyway?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, obviously, if they weren't given orders just to let them in, they're kind of doing a very poor job with their security protocols. But no, look, they do the most cursory checks of the people they actually stop that they can get away with because that's what their political leaders have directed them to do. And then they let them in. And their own IG report that came out and pointed out all of these criminals, all of these people with murder convictions, not suspected, not alleged. They've been convicted of murder, some of them here, and they let them in anyway. I don't get that. I don't see how anyone who has any sort of sentient behavior or sentient capacity allows that to happen. But it's not the border agents' fault. This is what they've been ordered to do.
The prisoner swap with Victor Bout and Brittany Griner to get Brittany Griner back to playing in the WNBA. Victor Bout, the so-called Lord of War or Merchant of Death, whichever you prefer, memorialized in the Lord of War, the movie with Nick Cage played Victor Bout. He's back in business, and the report from the Wall Street Journal is that he is helping to secure arms for the Iranian-backed Houthis, who are happy to attack and kill American soldiers that are in harm's way in theater right now, unbeknownst to Kamala Harris, apparently. The Houthis, arming the Houthis, Victor Bout. This turned out to be a good prisoner swap for America's interests?
Well, I don't know. It depends on what value you put on the WNBA, I guess.
I suppose, yeah.
No, it's not a good swap. It was an incredibly bad one. This was an honest-to-God bad guy who needed to stay in prison. Could we not have, negotiated to get somebody else out besides this hardcore criminal who's now, he just rolled right back into business, and his business is not good stuff.
Bo Bergdahl, Brittany. I mean, Bo Bergdahl is not the same as Brittany Griner, but the idea, the swap. So Taliban terrorists, by the way, they're now back in charge of Afghanistan. This just in. Victor Bout, by the way, he's back to being the Lord of War, and that puts American soldiers in harm's way. I mean, these prisoner exchanges, you want to get American hostages back, of course, but boy, it seems like we give away the store every time we do, and we end up potentially costing more lives than we saved.
Yeah, and Bergdahl, Brittany Griner was an American citizen who did something really stupid and broke Russian law. That was kind of common knowledge. Okay, I could understand trying to get her back.
Yeah.
Bergdahl deserted his post and got several of his unit mates killed when they went out to look for him because they thought he had, it was an inadvertent thing. As it turns out, he did it on purpose, going there, and we traded hardcore terrorist leadership for him and then celebrated it like we'd gotten a hero out of prison. Come on. He should have gone to jail. We should have just left him there. That's where he wanted to go. He should have stayed there.
The sickness of the Obama years, their really distaste for Americans, at least Americans who are not similarly ideologically affiliated. That's for sure. Stephen Bucci served America for 3 decades as an Army Special Forces officer and top Pentagon official, now a visiting fellow in the Heritage Foundation's Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies. Stephen, thanks as always.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.